Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Welcome, everybody, once again to VoteProPot-Cast. I'm Phil Adams.
I'm Jay Britton.
And I'm Andrew McCready's.
Well, we've got a lot of stuff to get to today, including an exclusive interview with an author named Jacob Levine, who will be speaking to us from over in Israel. Now, the internet connections overseas sometimes are a little dicey, and so you may hear a little bit of that, but there's a lot of great information you'll find. So we're going to get to that very shortly. But first, we've got some news articles to cover. Let's start with Andrew. What do you got, Andrew?
I have an article here about the FDA just outlawed CBDs and hemp oil extractions by claiming that the plant molecules now belong exclusively to Big Pharma. Now, what they're saying, since the Farm Bill legalized hemp, a lot of people just assume, well, hemp, CBD comes from hemp, and we can sell that. And everyone assumed that. But now, apparently, the FDA is coming back because they're saying that the big pharmaceutical companies have applications in to use CBD as a drug. And they said if it is qualified as a drug, then it'll have to be controlled. And therefore, while it's under the review process, they're telling people they can't sell it. Now, they've sent cease and desist orders to a number of CBD-producing companies. Now, other people in the industry are saying, no, that's not true. They can't do that. So right now, as far as everyone I've talked to, no one really knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I don't understand it. There's a serious conflict between the Farm Bill, as it relates to CBD or hemp, and production of CBD from hemp legally, and what the FDA says. You're right, Andrew. It's very confusing. And, man, if anybody out there listening is a lawyer or understands this, call our message line and let us know. We'll play it on the air or write us a note or something, because I am totally confused.
Because it's unfolding right now, so really there's not much to report other than we don't know what the hell's going on.
I see.
So I believe the coming up episodes we'll be getting to this in more detail.
I think we are. We're going to be following this because, can open worms everywhere as far as the legal battle goes. This is going to
like everything else in cannabis.
That's right. And to me, this really smacks of what I've referred to in the past, and some people call crony capitalism, where only the big boys, the ones with the big staff,
Big Pharma,
and the money and the resources to navigate all the regulatory mumbo jumbo, get to play, and the government and the big, connected corporations are working together to squeeze out all the little guys. That is crony capitalism, and that's got to stop.
Now, the FDA has the power to make something illegal. The FDA could come out tomorrow and say vitamin C is illegal. You have to you can only get it from companies that we authorize to sell it.
Gotcha.
Right, and
yeah, that's scary.
And a citizen could say bullshit, and I'm taking it to court, and hopefully somebody will.
Or also, a citizen could say, "Well, that's crap. I'm going to do it anyway," and they will end up in jail.
Well,
or on the black market.
We'll see, but
theoretically,
we have to get past this era of law by regulatory fiat. An executive branch regulatory agency should not have the power to create law. That power, according to the Constitution, resides with the legislative branch. And somewhere along the line, this is going to get taken up with the legislative branch. And I have to think that this will not stand the light of day. We'll have to see. I hope I'm right, but we'll just have to follow it. Now, I have a report here. Well, this is just the route that Ohio has gone with their medical marijuana. You have to qualify, and it's the same way here in Maryland. this is something that's been going on for a long damn time, but this is actually a good development. As many of you may know, the medical marijuana law was signed back in 2016, I think. Yes, 2016. But the program has yet to be put into implementation. It's still the subject of delay after delay after delay. The good news is many people, both in the state government, on the Ohio State Medical Board, and other experts, are becoming very much more confident that we're going to start seeing some movement very soon. They're saying we're right on the cusp, and the first medical cannabis sales could be starting any week now. One of the very good developments in all of this, however, and maybe it's a good thing that they've taken their time, is that opioid addiction is now being very strongly considered as one of the conditions, one of the allowable qualifying conditions for a medical marijuana license or card. Here in Maryland, the way it works is if you qualify for a certain medical condition, you can qualify for medical marijuana. In other states, it's just, up to the doctor to prescribe it, I imagine. But there are 44 or more conditions, 54, I'm sorry, that meet the basic requirements for consideration and are probably going to be part of the medical marijuana program. 6 new conditions, including opioid addiction, autism, general anxiety, chronic anxiety, depression, and insomnia, were selected by the Ohio State Medical Board for studies into whether or not they should be added as qualifying conditions for the state medical cannabis program. And this according to the Cincinnati Enquirer. So
general anxiety?
General anxiety.
Tell me that's not going to open the door.
I'm not feeling very confident about things.
I get anxiety. I need a medical marijuana card because I get anxiety every time I run out of marijuana.
Yeah. I think this boils down to the big complaint is why in the hell does some board of non-doctors, why are they allowed to prescribe what I can be, what
treated for?
Yeah. Shouldn't that be up to my doctor?
Well,
but anyway,
I assume
that's a whole other subject.
The state medical board has doctors on it.
I assume you're right. And that's fine and that's fair, but still.
Well, I think putting opiate addiction on it is great.
It is great, but why do you have to? Why can't the doctors decide if? But that's a whole other subject for another day. Understood. And that'll all go away once it's recreational anyway, which it will be everywhere eventually.
There's very good reasons, Andrew, for adding opioid addiction to this. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You and I went to a seminar and saw a doctor speak on this, and it's fascinating. What he says is that just like 1 milligram of cannabis, in addition to the opiate, greatly increases the effectiveness of the opiate in treating the pain. So you'll get better pain relief with lower doses of opiates if you combine even 1 milligram of cannabis.
That's astounding.
And then what he said, and other doctors I've heard say, what they do is then they start decreasing the amount of opiates and increase the amount of cannabis. So eventually you're just taking aspirin and cannabis for your pain.
Interesting.
And you're off the opiates.
Yeah.
And then cannabis is one of the easiest things to kick because there's no physical addiction. It's mostly just emotional.
And we had a guy write in on our Facebook page today about it, an article that we posted, and he said that he had, I'm afraid I don't remember exactly, I want to say it was Crohn's disease or something. He had a large portion of his intestine removed like 10 or 12 years ago, I believe. And he was on all kinds of, painkillers. And he said not only did he get addicted to it, but nothing worked for the pain like cannabis. And, of course, you hear these stories all the time. But I think that's interesting what you guys saw the doctor say about not only using it instead of painkillers, because I'm one of the people who falls in the camp that, I believe there's a time and a place for opiates. They work.
Absolutely.
When used correctly. But the fact what Andrew's saying that, being able to lower the dose significantly of the opioid by, combining it with cannabis is pretty exciting.
Well, and this doctor said that doing that greatly reduces the propensity to develop a tolerance.
Well, that
which
makes
is really
sense,
what's
yeah.
going on here with a lot of, with the addiction. The doctors will tell you, this opioid crisis, the problem is us. We're,
Right.
We have to help our patients manage pain, and, opioids work. So we prescribe them, but are they over prescribing them? Probably. But, the problem is they develop tolerance. They need more and more. The doctor's not going to keep prescribing more and more, at least they shouldn't.
Right.
And then the prescription runs out. So what do? They go to the black market, which is heroin. And that's where, they have
People
problems.
get addicted, yeah. Exactly.
And that's when they accidentally get fentanyl and die.
So, this is a good development. And Ohio may be dragging their feet, but hopefully they're taking their time and getting it right. So we'll see how that shakes out. We'll follow up with that at some point.
Everybody knows, everybody's read, everybody's heard that Oregon has way too much weed. And here's an article from the Willamette Week, which is a local paper, by Katie Shepard. It would take Oregonians 7 years to smoke all the weed they harvested this year. In 2017, Oregon grew far more cannabis than the state smokes. In 2018, it grew even more. And we've talked about how the state of Oregon apparently gave out way too many grow permits, as we understand it. As 2019,
they gave out thousands
of them. And so there's a glut now, and my understanding is you can buy weed for nothing.
It's $5 an eighth. You can get an ounce for $40.
So this is just an article that drives the point home by giving some examples. For example, first of all, it says as 2019 dawns, Oregon is sitting on 1.3 million pounds of unsold cannabis flower. While that total includes some just harvested flower that hasn't dried yet, it's still absurdly more weed than the 166,000 pounds of legal cannabis Oregon consumers smoked last year. So look at those numbers. They smoked 166,000 pounds last year. That's what was purchased, flower. And right now they're sitting on 1.3 million pounds. So to put it in perspective, it says here it would fill, that it being the amount of extra cannabis they have, would fill 589 million 1 gram pre-rolls. It would weigh the same as 360 Subaru Outbacks. It would take Oregon smokers 7.8 years to smoke it all if they continue to purchase weed at the same rate they are in 2018. So the question is, what are they going to do to fix this? They've got this glut, and they're not pulling back permits from people growing it. What are the farmers and growers going to do? I mean, how do you fix this?
Well, a lot of them are going to stop growing on their own.
Yeah,
because there's no money in it.
There's no money.
Just think you put all this money to get into the commercial cannabis business as a grower, and all of a sudden, boom! You're thinking, God, I'm going to get $3,000 a pound, and now you're getting $150 a pound.
And
a couple $100.
Other articles I've read said that these growers are not even. I mean, they're not even to make anywhere near a profit. And so, what's going to fix this, unfortunately, is a whole lot of growers going bankrupt. That's what's going to fix it.
Yep. Unfortunately.
Or they'll get out of or they'll start growing something else,
Yeah. Now, didn't we do a story last November about a week after Canada went legal?
They ran out.
They were pretty much out of weed.
It's gonna,
now,
they
there's
take a while to catch up.
weed in Canada and a glut of weed in Oregon. Can't these two jurisdictions get together?
Well, the law sort of
not as long as
stands in the way of that at the moment.
Does it?
That's why we're here. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can ship it across state lines.
Federal law precludes Oregon from shipping excess weed, surplus weed, to Canada and making a profit to help supply Canada's weed deficit.
That's my understanding.
Well,
what happened to the free trade agreement? That should have been part of it.
I don't know. It seems to me what they need to do with all that weed is to make oil out of it or keef and age it.
Yeah.
Because now they're saying
that's going to have a longer shelf life, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't matter, though. You still have a glut. You can't sell it. There's just way too much product. Right. I mean, what are you going to wait flour, 15 years to sell? It's just, yeah.
Or they could package it up and give it to the Red Cross. Next time there's a natural disaster, they can start giving away.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah. It won't fix people's, it won't fix people's homes, but it'll make them a little less sad about it. Last year was a pretty big year for cannabis, and 2019 shaping up to be even bigger. As the shifts in the political and social landscape continue to accelerate, the national discussion surrounding cannabis is becoming more contentious and more complex. And like any political issue, it's the subject of competing claims and counterclaims and research, and it's getting a little harder to sift through all the facts and fiction. Here to help us understand all of it and to help us formulate a more rational, logical approach to the debate is the author of the book Cannabis Discourse, Facts and Opinions in Context. Please welcome Jacob Levine. Jacob, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about 2018 for you. Was it a big year?
It's definitely been a big year. There's been a lot going on. I moved actually 3 times. I lived in Spain, then I lived in London, and now I live in Tel Aviv in Israel. In terms of cannabis, there's been a lot going on. There's Canada legalized federally cannabis, so that's been amazing. And in general, I think the world is beginning to accept cannabis at a much faster pace.
Do you feel like we've reached a tipping point, or are we still kind of on the other side, waiting for that watershed moment? Well,
it depends. What do you mean by a tipping point?
Well, would you say that time is on our side at this point? As more time goes on, the more likely legalization will be here in the United States and around the world?
Yeah, I think what's happening is I don't think this is something that's going back. I don't think the is going to kick back, and I don't think we're there. I think the legalization, it's a matter of when rather than a matter of if. So I definitely think that one day, quite soon, cannabis will be federally legalized in the US. Of course, now comes the thing. A lot of people say it's going to be legalized, but what does that actually mean?
Right.
It means so many different things. Like, doesn't mean that it's... when people say that it's going to be legalized, do they refer to the descheduling of cannabis from Schedule 1 substance to a Schedule 2 substance, or are all states going to be able to determine their own laws in terms of cannabis on a federal level? I'm not sure. And also, if you break it down, then what was it that becomes legal? The entire chain, the transportation, the growing, the sales, the consumption. Where can you consume?
Right. So there's a whole spectrum of legalization that what shape it could take.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely interesting to know the different nuances of legalization and legal cannabis systems. So I think that's something good to keep in mind whenever people think that something's illegal, but maybe some parts are legal, some parts are not. Like in the Netherlands, for example, the growing and transportation is not necessarily legal. However, the sales in coffee shops is. So, just something to keep in mind. But yeah, I definitely think that it's going to forward and become fairly legalized at some point.
Tell us a bit about your background and how you came to write Cannabis Discourse.
Sure. So I've been working for cannabis companies in Europe, and I've been writing blogs and articles for them, also strain reviews. So in terms of articles and blogs, I've written anything that has to do with the legal status in different countries, how to roll joints, different cannabis products, what vaporizers are, CBD is, what is the entourage effect, just a lot of different blogs. And after a year of writing, I decided to just write my own book. I always wanted to write a book, so I wanted to write something meaningful, and I thought it was the time to do so. So I started writing a book about cannabis. But after a month of doing a lot of research, I realized that I was the one who didn't know so much. I just realized that I needed to write something more objective, as something that doesn't put me in the seat of an expert.
You present neither a pro-cannabis nor an anti-cannabis argument in your book, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because I realized that, a lot of people, a lot of writers, and some cannabis books that I've read, they're very they just say that cannabis is definitely this, and it definitely helps for cancer, it definitely helps for anxiety, But then I'm thinking, okay, well, I am not a doctor, I am not a scientist. It would be irresponsible to just make health claims. And I've never made any health claims in terms of cannabis, even during my writing years for the cannabis companies in Europe. So basically, I just decided, okay, I'm just going to present what's going on. That is the best thing to do. Just to show people that there are two sides of the argument. And I want to do so because just to elevate people's understanding of the discourse itself. Because very often,
I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I did learn quite a lot.
Nice.
And now the first part, you offered the reader kind of a primer on cannabis itself, the nature, the properties, the use, the history, etc., as well as a kind of a glossary of terms associated with it.
Yeah.
What are some of the important things you want readers to learn from this part of the book?
Oh, that's a very good question. So it may seem like it's completely irrelevant in relation to the rest of the book. However, I think it's very important to understand what the plant actually is, because I think there are a lot of people who think that they say cannabis should be legal because of this, cannabis should be illegal because of that, but they don't understand what the product is itself. For example, people want to make growing of cannabis illegal. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, if you understood what the plant is, you can take a seed, an out-of-flowering strain of cannabis, you could put it somewhere like in the middle of the woods, and it will grow in 60 days, and you will get approximately 30 grams of cannabis from one plant.
Okay.
So then you're thinking, okay, so how are you going to start regulating that? Like, are you going to, how much police enforcement would you need to enforce laws to basically scan all the forest areas and everybody's car?
That's a great point.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And also, in terms of, if you would make concentrate of cannabis and you would put it in a jar, this jar would be worth, I don't know, maybe like $1,000, if not more, of cannabis. Mm-hmm. How are you going to find that? I just want people to understand what the product is itself. People also say that
it's a plant, and the plant has properties, and people need to know what those properties are.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just so much. It's so valuable to understand what the plant is itself, and how products are made as well, because having some flower, some dried bud is not the same thing as smoking concentrates. Okay, it's two different things.
Correct.
Or, for example, edibles as well. This is a good example. A lot of people who eat edibles, they start freaking out because they just had a too big a dose.
Yeah.
But that's because, you can put a lot of cannabis into one piece of cake, like a lot. Like you could put 50 times the desired dose into a chocolate bar. And when you eat it, of course, it's going to be a lot, So those are
and you're going to have a very bad night.
Yeah, exactly, or a very bad day and night,
Yeah, and then you'll wake up a couple days later feeling refreshed, but you will have taken too much.
Yeah, well, it depends if you feel refreshed. Some people think it's a horrible experience, but that's the thing. Like, imagine you've never consumed cannabis, and then you eat a brownie, or a brownie filled with a lot of cannabis, and then you start freaking out, and then this is what cannabis is for you.
We kind of liken that to someone who's never tried a drink before, and then they drink a whole bottle of vodka.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too much.
Yeah, exactly. And imagine, like, vodka is not the same thing as beer. Even though it's alcohol, both
That's right.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. So definitely valid to understand the plant, what it is.
Okay, so now in the next section, you help the reader to understand, again, not what to think about cannabis, but kind of how to think about it. Specifically, the ways in which information is presented, often manipulated, how to sort it all out. For example, when we do an internet search, we'll often find exactly the answers we wanted to find. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, of course. It's one wants their beliefs to be confirmed, so they just search the internet in order to confirm those beliefs, and that's it.
Yeah. Now, there have been times in our podcasts when, quite honestly, I have presented a news story only to discover that I'd been taken in by a flashy headline.
Yeah.
How do we avoid doing that?
Well, I don't think it's about what you read, but it's about how you read it.
Okay.
Like, I can still I used a lot of different articles and blogs in my book, and they're not necessarily all reliable, but it's not about the reliability of them. I wanted to present what is going on. So how is it that people think about cannabis? So whenever we read things about cannabis, it's just try to read between the lines of what's going on. I outlined in my book a couple of ways to do that, of course. For example, what's very important to keep in mind is what was the financial incentive of the company that provides a certain article, right? So if you are selling CBD products and you say that CBD cures cancer, well, you have a financial incentive of saying that. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong. The information itself is wrong. It's just something to keep in mind, right?
Well, you do have to consider their agenda.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't know, like, I haven't, even though I've written this book, like, I haven't fully figured out how to approach, like, if you read something, it's more about why is it that people need to focus on facts? As in, like, cannabis does this or cannabis does that. Has cannabis been legalized there or not? And I think we already know that we don't really have a problem in general with drug consumption. We already consume alcohol, we already consume coffee, tobacco, all kinds of substances that make us feel a certain way.
Uh-huh.
So that's my point. That's partially my point, that whenever we read certain blogs and articles, we already view them from a specific, we already have like an entire story behind us, behind the search of the facts.
So the claims are often, uncertain. I mean, two people could drink from the same pot of coffee and have two completely different experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
So to say that cannabis does this or cannabis does that, well, what does it do for you? What does it not do?
Okay, so like the entire part that I just said, like, I haven't figured it completely out, so I don't want to come across as some expert that knows exactly how facts need to be interpreted or not. I just think it's very interesting how there's a context to drug consumption. We don't have a problem in general with drugs, but suddenly when we speak about cannabis, it's like, okay, well, does cannabis cause harm to your brain? Does cannabis cannabis good for elderly people? Does it really cure cancer? Does it really have medicinal properties? But it's like, we don't ask these same questions for other substances. So I just find that If there's a message that I want to mediate, it will be that. It's just context.
Well, one of the main contexts is, when we hear about research that claims this effect or that result of using cannabis, they'll often describe users in terms of regular or occasional or heavy users.
Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves, what do those terms mean exactly, and how are we supposed to know?
Well, that's a very good question. How are we supposed to know? What is a heavy? Some article can say, okay, heavy use. Somebody is a heavy user of cannabis. Doesn't mean that they smoke 1 joint a day. Doesn't mean that they smoke 5 joints a day. Doesn't mean that they smoke 1 joint per week. I think this is something that definitely is being manipulated a lot. How, like, occasional use, heavy use, moderate use, people just play around with words to push through their arguments, basically.
Yeah, and we're both writers, so we know how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote in the beginning of the book, I don't know the exact phrase I used, but I could convince any reader of basically anything that has to do with cannabis, because I've read so many different blogs and articles. I just know how to manipulate people in terms of what to think. Of course, I'm not doing that, but I could.
But people do. There's a saying that goes, figures don't lie, but liars do figure. This has been a lot of fun and very enlightening. Lots of very useful and timely information, and I sure do appreciate your taking the time to discuss these with us.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Jacob, and we sure hope you'll stay in touch. Well, I want to thank Jacob Levine for taking the time to speak with me and to share his insights. Once again, the name of the book is Cannabis Discourse, Facts and Opinions in Context by Jacob Levine. And you can find that on Amazon, and we will post a link to it in the show description. And it's definitely a good read. We hope you'll enjoy it. So we always ask folks to send us their comments or questions at VoteProPot.com and on VoteProPot@gmail.com. Well, this came to us through VoteProPot.com. This was a letter sent to us from Phil H., and the subject was synthetic pot. Phil says, during one of your recent podcasts, you mentioned that synthetic pot was THC sprayed onto potpourri. This is pretty inaccurate. The chemicals can vary, but are chemicals that were originally developed to study the effects of THC, but bind to the cannabinoid receptors much more strongly. It is not THC. I would like to direct you to the following Leafly article, and we're going to post the link to that article so you can check it out yourself. And Phil, you are absolutely right. I believe that the potpourri comment was mentioned a little tongue-in-cheek, was it not?
Well, that was me. I read somewhere that this synthetic marijuana that you see at gas stations and convenience stores, and someone described it as potpourri sprayed with formaldehyde or something. And I think I used that phrase. But that's what I heard. It's just some kind of plant substance that's sprayed with chemicals.
Right, and many of them can be very detrimental. But here is a case where, now, as I mentioned in the interview with Jacob Levine, this was what I was talking about when I said that I was taken in by a flashy headline. And the flashy headline had to do with synthetic THC, also known as Marinol, I believe. And I was confusing Marinol with this crap that you get at the gas station that people are getting sick from. So anyway, we want to...
Right, because a headline used the term synthetic marijuana.
Right. So there is synthetics and there's synthetics. And check out the article from Leafly. Again, we're going to post it. It's called What is Synthetic Marijuana and Why is it Dangerous? But this is exactly the kind of listener input that we really need. We bill ourselves as amateur experts, which means we're really not experts at all. And we're not above messing up our facts from time to time. So thank you, Phil, for sending this in and bringing this to our attention. Well, thank you all once again for tuning into this episode. We want to keep in touch with you, and we want to hear from you. Check us out at VoteProPot.com.
Send us an email at VoteProPot@gmail.com or call our message line at 240-257-2441.
Please like and follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Just do a search for VoteProPot. And our apologies to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's here in the studio to be interviewed, but we ran out of time. So we'll try to get to him next week.
Yeah, sorry, Justin. We'll get around to you. And we hope everybody is staying warm and safe in this winter weather. And as always, stay informed, stay involved, and vote pro-pot.
Wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting kidnapped by the police today sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. The judge looked down upon me, frowned. He said, "Kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your morning with espresso and a J." I said, "I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day." Hitched on out to Portland, caught a ride up to BC, took the bus over to the neighborhood to have a bowl with my coffee. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. Smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day.